I think it's kind of funny that Immortals go from being this esports organization that inflated the entire LCS salaries to then now they're signing players like Destiny. No shade to the brother, but everybody's got to get the money. But we look at the entire lineup of Immortals, and really, it's not like they're shelling out any crazy amount of cash. But also, too, I don't think this is, a budget roster. I actually think that these names still offer or require a significant amount of salary. So we're looking at Revenge, Xerxes, Power of Evil, Wild Turtle, and Destiny. So this lineup, just on paper itself, actually doesn't look too bad, and relative to the rest of the league, which is actually on budget rosters, uh, this this actually starts to look like a pretty good roster. And maybe this was Immortals' plan all along. And 2022 is like where they take advantage of it with inflating all the salaries back in what, like 2017, I want to say. And Huni is still getting the bag. But anyways, so to go from top to bottom, let's start with, the top laner, which is Revenge, and the fact that I still think that he has promise. And he actually had some pretty good games in 2021. I remember he was really good on Aatrox, and then Set. Set was like one of his better picks. So it does look like he can still pop off if he's able to get set up correctly and he's able to get, his certain niche champs that he wants, right? And, not to mention what his Camille was also very good too. So I think that he is shaping up to be a pretty good top laner, just as long as he starts to rein in maybe some of the dumb mistakes that he makes early on, to where it entirely screws over his lane, and then he is basically stuck under his turret, and he is at that point a liability. So as long as he is able to, I guess, rein in those games to where, he has his good pop-off games, but then he also maybe has his neutral games. That's where I would like to see him go, is the fact that he just goes even against, the other top laner and whatnot. But I actually think he is on an upward trajectory, so I don't hate this pick from Immortals. I think this is good to keep him onto the roster just to see how he develops further on, because you might end up striking gold if, the meta keeps on favoring him necessarily, and he just ends up shoring up his little mistakes here and there, because little mistakes in the top lane are big mistakes, which is unfortunate about the role, but that's just the way fucking top lane is, right? That's why fucking masochists play top lane, because it's just like, I don't know, they like hurting themselves or something. Anyways, so moving to jungle, we're talking about Xerxes here, and I feel like he went under the radar as like summer started to end. In the fact that he was cooling down from his spring split, I think it was, to where he was absolutely crushing people. I thought he was one of the better junglers in the entire league, in fact, and he was just performing very, very well. So I think people forgot about that Xerxes. And so I like that Immortals have actually kept on to him, especially considering that spring is probably the time to where you want to keep on Xerxes, because he just has a good mind for the game. He is very quick to pick up certain things, certain new things about the game, right? Because we're going with, the preseason and whatnot. And so it's clear that he's going to have a lot of different ideas about the game, and he's going to have a head start over a lot of other junglers just because of his ability to pick up things very quickly. So I think that's one of Xerxes' biggest strengths. And not only that, I don't know if you guys remember that interview that I did with Xerxes, where he talks about how having less scrims meant that it was kind of shallowing up people's champion pools, because now you don't want to practice new champions in scrims because that's going to take up scrim time, right? And there's only a finite number of scrims that you can do, even less so because there were 3 days of broadcast. So that offered less time for experimentation. Now there's more time for experimentation. So therefore, that's Xerxes' playground, right? He loves testing new things and testing limits of different champions. So I think that's going to work out in his favor. So that's why I like actually keeping Xerxes within this lineup. And I just think overall he's just a pretty good jungler. And when you get him in the right meta and you get him in the right mindset, I think he could be a great jungler, in fact. So I don't mind Immortals keeping Xerxes. So now we move on to Power of Evil. So I think PoE kind of fits this roster to a certain degree, because I feel like what was maybe missing from the Immortals roster was from 2021 was the fact that there was no stabilizing piece in the mid lane. They had Insanity in the mid lane, which he would sometimes drop the ball, and that forced Xerxes, in order to not be able to take advantage of the enemy jungler, he had to play on the back foot a lot. And then also this caused problems in the top side as well too. So when you essentially plug the hole with PoE and you get someone who is incredibly stable, he can go toe-to-toe with the best mid laners in the entire league, and he's just an all-around good mid laner. I think he fits perfectly within this squad. You have Revenge, who can go harder now. You have Xerxes, who can go harder. And you have Wild Turtle, who has always kind of gone hard, sometimes too fucking hard in the late game. So I think this is a good insurance policy. We'll just say they got the premium insurance policy for their brand new car of what is the revamped Immortals roster, which isn't that revamped. I guess they have an insurance policy on an old ass car. I don't know. Keep flowing with these car analogies. So I do like PoE though. I think he's a good pickup, and I think that it will take this team a little bit further. And this is my hope, that PoE actually becomes a solid rock for both Xerxes and especially for Revenge, to show us what they're really capable of. And also, now we have Wild Turtle in the bot lane, along with Destiny. Now, Wild Turtle, I think, is a decent player to, I guess, bring into your midst, just as, an overall iteration throughout the LCS, because when you consider his play style, he plays very unorthodox to typically what a lot of other ADCs are afraid to do, which is go for some of these riskier plays, which can oftentimes lead to a great benefit. And I think it more often does for a Wild Turtle than it doesn't. So I think this is a decent matchup. And along with this too, he had previous synergy with PoE in 2020 in FlyQuest. So you already have like this, kind of loose duo synergy type shit, which I guess really a synergy with an ADC really doesn't matter in the context of other than the support themselves. But Wild Turtle too is kind of a talkative voice within comms whenever you hear him in comms on any of his number of teams, except maybe the earlier iterations of TSM, right? Shout out to Reggie. But I think this is going to be a pretty good lineup. And pairing with Destiny, though, I don't really like that pairing. I've never really been high on this Destiny guy's stock. I think it just kind of shows the lack of depth of maybe, I guess, just the North American talent pool of itself when it comes to support players. And I think this is pretty evident that we're really lacking in support players. And so if there is going to be a weakness within this squad. I actually think it's going to come from the support position, maybe with the veterancy of what is, Wild Turtle, that maybe there's some things that he could shore up in him. But yeah, I do see this as a weak point of the entire squad, but I don't think it's going to be massive enough to where actually it's going to be a major hindrance to the entire Immortals lineup. I actually kind of like it. And if, Destiny is able to learn a thing or two more, great. Then maybe he becomes, a mid-table support, and then you can kind of work your way from there. So overall, I like Immortals. It kind of sounds weird saying that, but I kind of like Immortals considering the context of 2022. And then you have the coaching staff of Invert and Dardoch. I think this is really interesting. First, Dardoch being now an assistant coach. As you could see previously, he was, it was kind of like a quasi-experiment to have him as a positional coach over in 2021. And then, you have Invert just stepping up here. And I've kind of thought that Invert has always had a decent mind for the game. I'm not going to say that he's had like this great mind for the game. But I do think that he has a decent mind for the game. Every time that I hear him talk, or, I have him in some interviews, I think he's able to eloquently explain higher level ideas to, whether they be very abstract down to the simple, or from the simple to the abstract. I think he does that relatively well. And then Dardoch I think he's a good pairing with Xerxes, right? Because this is naturally what we're going to point towards, in the fact that given they both are heavy experimenters when it comes to both champions, right? It's like, the whole joke of what champion is Dardoch going to play next? And also just their ideas about the game and the experimentation about the game. So I think this is a really good pairing. They could probably bounce off a lot from each other. And this, I think, might extend Xerxes' ability to keep playing new things and fresh things going into even the summer split, and kind of keep reinventing himself. Along with that, of course, he does have the stable rock of the mid lane, which is PoE. So he might actually get more of first picks and whatnot. So I'm just looking out for that. I think that's going to be really interesting from the coaching staff. I kind of like this take, because I think this was done intentionally, in fact. And then, just as a side note, you have Freeze 2, I guess, otherwise known as Nightshare, who is the academy head coach, who is coming from the ERLs in Europe. And he is actually the twin brother of Freeze, the coach over in 100 Thieves. So I think that's kind of a little storyline that we'll get to hear about, maybe in North America, just as the basis of like organizations or whatnot. Maybe we'll see Nightshare get to, go on stage or something and get a little time up there. So I think that's kind of a cool little side story. And he's never won anything over in, like EU Masters and whatnot. So it's not like this is some big accolade coach or whatnot. But I do think it's interesting, and I want to see maybe how his Immortals lineup shapes up, because as we know with Freeze, when he was a professional player, he was playing ADC. He was more like a conservative player. I would say really his play style was more in between what was, reckless, conservative. Then you have Forgiven, which is aggressive, and he kind of slotted somewhere in the middle. And he was always compared to Forgiven, and he was always compared to Reckless, in fact. So it'll be interesting to see maybe his take on the game and how that plays out, or how that differs from Freeze's take on the game. That'll be really interesting to see. Overall, I think this team should actually place pretty high. Like I said before, 2022 is the budget year. There are a lot of big names that are missing from the league. And this is clearly a budget year. So that means that Immortals can maybe do a surprising run. Surprising, and I say that for the brand of the team, right? Because you don't typically associate Immortals with being, a high placing team, I guess, or organization in the LCS, unless we're going back to like 2017 with Hooney and Rainover and shit and whatnot. So yeah, I think they actually could be a weird quasi dark horse, if you want to get to the nitty gritty of it. And I think pretty much guaranteed this squad will make playoffs, which is top 6, of course. So they're gonna be ahead of the pack, probably, of what is the amalgamation of all these bottom tier teams. I think they're gonna be just significantly better than them, just enough to where they could ride it out and then maybe get an extension into the playoffs of spring split, and then we'll see when it comes to summer. But yeah, so I think this roster is very interesting. It obviously didn't break the bank, and it comes at probably a perfect time to where you can't afford to break the bank against the likes of someone like a Team Liquid or someone like a Cloud9 and 100 Thieves. So this is obviously a good middle ground, and it's a good year to do a middle ground because it's just very easy to beat all of the other bottom table teams, because you don't really have to spend much in order to do so, because a lot of those other rosters are kind of just shit. So yeah, Immortals rosters is actually looking not bad.